crew went through in 1914 when they're sailing the vessel, trying to just make it to shore because they hadn't seen land in 400 and some odd days. Really interesting account. Terrible sailing conditions. They were 497 days that they hadn't been on land. In between ice flows and hopping between these ice flows. Completely broken up ships, so they're using these tiny little boats and sailing in these little small boats and not even sailing in ships. When they're making landfall and trying to traverse these different obstacles, very similar to what is happening here in this voyage that Paul's going through right now. When we go through and they talk about, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. The storm gets so bad that they have to put braces underneath the ship, around the ship. And Shackleton did the same thing, that they had to brace the ship from the crushing ice that they were sleeping in. And they had to make extra bracing inside the ship until it eventually just succumbed to the ice flow and cracked up. But just incredible story. Very comparable to what Paul's going through here, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. So the journey's not easy, to say the least. It's just going to get worse. Hard winds, hard times, hard sailing conditions, and it's getting ready to get much worse. Paul warns both the centurion and the helmsman, who's the owner of the ship, says, let's stop, let's not go any further. The sailing is too dangerous because it's already past the Day of Atonement, or the fast is already over with. So the time frame here is late September, October, and during that time frame in the Mediterranean, it's notorious for bad storms during that time. And they actually have a name for this storm we'll get to in just a little bit. The specific time frame, Paul knows after being shipwrecked 3 times that this could be another one. So he's seen this before. He's seen this story play out before. So he was unable to persuade the centurion to listen to him and to heed his warning. So the helmsman convinces him for reason of his own funds that he's hauling this shipment, or he just wants to get out of the fray. He thinks he can make it. I don't know the reason why the helmsman wouldn't heed it, but he wanted to push on forward. Do you have something, Bill?
What's interesting is they're trying to make it to Phoenix, and it looks like it's 20 miles maybe? I don't know, 30? And you think maybe that's an achievable proposition, but just, man, I had other plans.
Yeah. We'll see that. This specifically, you're right. It's right. It looks right there. Like, why can't you make that just that amount of time? But again, headwinds, very difficult sailing. And again, I'll compare this back to Ernest Shackleton's journey when he was trying to make just around the bend for several days just to be able to get on this shoreline that is that's not habitable, but it will shelter them and get them off the ice. They couldn't make it just hundreds of yards, and they're expert sailors in the Antarctic. So it's very comparable and very interesting that, it just looks like it's right there, but these guys couldn't make it. Shackleton couldn't make it a couple of 100 yards either. So I'm not a sailor, so I don't know how difficult that would be, but I guess it is difficult. So again, it's after the fast. He tells them to let's just hold out here. He wasn't able to persuade them, and they didn't wind up making it. Didn't wind up making it there. Okay, so the helmsman, like I said, wanted to make one more push, and we're getting ready to go into the tempest right now. So 13 through 26, sir.
26?
Yes, sir.
The New King James Version is what I'm reading. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had attained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close to Crete. But not long after, a tempestuous head wind arose called Slidon. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive. And running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. When they had taken it on board, They used cables to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run underground on the Syrtis sands, they struck sail and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed, the next day they had lightened the ship. On the third day, we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Now, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we would be saved was finally given up. For after long abstinence from food, then Paul stood in the midst of them and said, Men, you should have listened to me and not have sailed from Crete and incurred this disaster and loss. And now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For there stood by me the knight of an angel of God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar. And indeed God has granted you all those who sail with you. Therefore take heart, men, for I believe God that it will be just as it was told to me. However, we must run aground on a certain island.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so one more push. The helmsman wants to go. The centurion says go, so they go. They're getting ready to go into this terrible storm. They're lulled into this sense of security by this this soft southerly wind that they had. But that, again, that's just a deceiving thing for them. I was also reminded, if any of you seen that movie, The Perfect Storm, back in the day? I don't remember the year. George Clooney movie back in the day, The Perfect Storm. They are sailors, they're fishermen, and they're leaving the New England area, and they're going to go out fishing. Some of them are in rough shape for money and whatever different things. But they want to go out, and they do a terrible job of fishing, and they eventually wind up having a great fishing day, and they just want one more round of fishing. So they keep going into the storm. They think they're going to push through the storm. And this big nor'easter comes up, and the end of the movie is terrible. Wipes them all out, and they all die. The end. So anyway, they just wanted one more push, and there's the exact same thing that was happening here. The helmsman thought that he could make it, maybe for financial reasons. Again, the centurion maybe was encouraged by his confidence and wanted to push through as well. We know that doesn't happen. It doesn't end well for them, for the ship anyway. Again, we see this with difficulty. I always find that really interesting, how Luke is so descriptive on most everything, and then he just says something just offhanded, like it was hard. We did it with difficulty. There's a lot more. Maybe the Greek has a lot more description in there that we can read into, but our translation says that it was just difficult. Yeah, working on your car is difficult. They're sailing, in the Mediterranean Sea in a terrible storm, and that's a different level of difficulty. So this storm was called I don't know if you read this or not, Tyler. That was a Euroclydon. Is that what you said it was?
Yeah, Euroclydon.
Yeah. So two words put together, but basically this storm is a nor'easter. It's the same thing. It's just a specific type of storm that happened in this region at this time. A Latin word and a Greek word put together, and they called it a Euroclydon for this translation, New King James. Anyway, it's basically like this nor'easter storm, like I was talking about before. Really difficult storm, lasted a long time period. The last one that they had, the last one that I researched was 1996 that they had in this region that did a significant amount of damage to France and Italy and Greece. And you can research the 1996 Great Storm, I think is what they called it. I didn't look a whole lot into it, but that was considered the same type of storm as this Euroclydon, just this huge, huge storm that happened in 1996. Anyway, they weren't able to head into the wind anymore. So it had just been so strong and such a terrible storm that they couldn't just go any further. I think they were probably on the verge of mutiny, and we'll see a couple of things that play into that thinking here in a little bit. But the crew has got to be ready to get off this ship. I'm sure everybody, all the prisoners are ready to get off this ship because they are just kept there. And this is not a good circumstance that they're in. And then Paul encourages those that are on board. Actually, I'll skip my notes here just a little bit. They run under shelter under Clauda. Let's see, the ship-to-ship, the boats, the reason I said the mutiny, I skipped my notes and messed this up. But they had this little boat that they used to transfer from ship to shore, a very much smaller little boat. And some of the crew were going to get this ship, and they were going to take off. And instead, they were told not to. They were fearing that they might run aground in this Syrtis sands, and that's basically just a sandbar. So we know it's sandbar. If you've ever been to the beach, you've seen sandbars before. But we're talking about this huge vessel. If they run aground on a sandbar in this storm, then they're going to be completely wrecked. So they want to try to avoid this sandbar. And so they wind up throwing some tackle overboard. And that weight would increase their buoyancy. They'll be able to pop up a little bit further. And then we're told that it drives the ship on because they're a lot lighter. So they didn't listen to Paul's advice, and now the helmsman and the owner of the ship has to basically batten down the hatches, secure the ship, and the rigging and the tackle are thrown overboard just so that they wouldn't run aground and lose their load. All of the funds that would have been raised from that, and the people. So a little bit of protection for the people there. And then Paul has an angelic vision, and he is reassured. Again, we've seen this a couple of other times, that Paul has been reassured. Christ reassured him to be of good cheer. Here we see this in this angelic vision that he's comforted, saying that the ship won't be lost and no lives will be lost. And that everything will be okay, but you will lose the ship. The ship will be lost, but no lives. So in the attempt, we're getting ready to see the attempt to abandon ship, and we'll see a little bit of mutiny here in the next couple of verses. Any questions there? We'll move on to Ari for the last. Bring us home.
But when the 14th night came, as we were being driven about in the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors began to surmise that they were approaching some land. They took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms, and a little further on they took another sounding and found it to be 15 fathoms. Fearing that we might run aground somewhere on the rocks, they cast 4 anchors from the stern and wished for daybreak. But as the sailors were trying to escape from the ship and had let down the ship's boat into the sea on the pretense of intending to lay out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, "Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved." Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it fall away. Until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food, saying, "Today is the 14th day that you have been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore I encourage you to take some food, for this is for your preservation. For not a hair from the head of any of you will perish." And having said this, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all, and he broke it and began to eat. All of them were encouraged, and they themselves also took food. All of us in the ship were 276 persons. When they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing out the wheat into the sea. And when the day came, they could not recognize the land, but they did observe a bay with a beach, and they resolved to drive the ship onto it if they could. And casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea while at the same time they were loosening the ropes of the rudders and hoisting the foresail to the wind. They were heading for the beach. But striking a reef where two seas met, they ran the vessel aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable, but the stern began to be broken up by the force of the waves. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none of them would swim away and escape. But the centurion, wanting to bring Paul safely through, kept them from their intention and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land. And the rest should follow, some on planks and others on various things from the ship. And so it happened that they were all brought safely to land.
Thank you. So we're at 14 nights into this terrible storm. They're in the Adriatic now, so they've moved further west now. Around that Malta, they've gone south, going towards Africa. That's where this sandbar was. So they're afraid that they're going to go so far south that they're going to hit the sandbar. Now they're 14 days in. They don't know really where they are, but they feel like they're going to be hitting some land here soon. So they start taking soundings, and I had to research this too, what a sounding was. It basically is just they'll drop this like a plumb line, this lead weight or whatever, on a string, and they'll drop it, and they'll count how many lengths it was, and they call them fathoms. So here we know that it's 20 fathoms down until they hit land, and that's just 6 feet. So it's 120 feet down is how far they were. And then they take another sounding, and it was 15 feet, or 15 fathoms, which is 6 feet, right? And then that's 90 feet. So they know that they're getting closer and closer to land because it's getting shallower and shallower. So they think they're getting even closer, so they drop these anchors. And they're dropping them, what we find out, is around this Malta area, because Luke does such a good job of talking about the drift and the location of where they are. And they use the fact that it says that they landed in Malta in chapter 28. But they know exactly where they are. Very good record keeping here. And they drop these 4 anchors so that they don't crash in to the rocks and kill everybody. And so they're praying for day to come. They haven't eaten in 14 days. And Paul prevents the sailors from just abandoning ship and taking the skiff down, the small boat, saying that everybody's going to die if you don't stop these guys. So the centurion stops them. So they're on the verge of full mutiny here at this point. But the centurion still has a little bit of control because of centurion and the helmsman, because the crew's disciplined and the soldiers are disciplined. So Paul is very calm still at this point. He knows that God is with him. He's had the vision of the angel. He knows that they're all going to be saved. So he's able to express that confidence to the sailors and to the crew, just to take a breath. Let's eat some food. Let's pray. I'm going to show you how to be thankful. He takes bread. He gives thanks in presence of everybody. And thanks God, and then they ate. So this confidence calms everyone down. They were all encouraged and felt like and knew that no one would die, just as Paul had said. So 276 souls on board, all saved, or will be saved. That's what we're going to find out here, or we did find out here. So after eating, they lighten the ship even more. They throw all the grain overboard so that they're even more buoyant. So no food, no equipment, around 300 terrified people in the storm for about 2 weeks, with no end in sight, but they know morning is coming. Pretty interesting vision there, if you can think about that, how terrifying that must have been. But they're encouraged here by Paul too. He's had this vision of the angel, and he's using that confidence and that knowledge that God is with him and God is with them, that they're going to get through this. So back again to the endurance, the fact that, or the idea that Ernest Shackleton tried to make this run on the beach and didn't succeed. They're doing the same thing. They're going to make the run on the beach. They see this bay and this beach, and the way Luke writes it, we know that where they landed, that there's only a couple of places that this could have happened on Malta, because Malta is just nothing but cliffs. And there's just a few spots that there actually is a beach that they could have landed. So in this location, they finally are able to make somewhat land where they crash into the shoals and wind up being shipwrecked, but they're close enough to the shore that they're able to get off. They cut the anchors in that area so that they actually can make the run. And so that's something we'll keep there too. They wind up hitting the reef. Half the ship breaks apart, but we know where that location is today. So if you go to the museum in Malta, you will find that there are 4 lead anchors that are found in this exact area based off of some computer software that they used and the telling that Luke wrote down here. They went to the exact location and were able to find these 4 anchors. And so they're sitting in the museum. They're made of lead, and all 4 of them are in that museum that they found right there. What they thought was the traditional landing site was called St. Paul's Bay, but that's actually the wrong location where they found these anchors. They didn't find any anchors in St. Paul's Bay, which is the northeast side of the island. They found the 4 anchors in the southwest part of the island in St. Thomas Bay. So all the tourist attractions and things in Malta are all on the northeast side, where they traditionally thought would have been the landing site of Paul. But here, where they actually found the anchors, and when they used this description accurately, they found that it was in that southwestern portion of the island where they found those anchors and the accurate description that Paul wrote down here. So that was really interesting. The landing actually happened. The anchors actually exist. The telling that Luke wrote down was actually real. Once again, we find that the Bible is historically accurate, and we can use that today. So they lost the ship, but all of the prisoners didn't escape. They were threatened to escape. But they didn't escape. They stayed there. The centurion was smart enough to let the soldiers go on the beach and steered them away from killing all the prisoners. He found a way and solved that problem so that Paul didn't die. He wanted to keep all the prisoners alive. So the centurion was able to save Paul there. Okay. I think that's it for tonight. Do y'all have any questions or any comments for tonight's lesson?
I don't think they had compasses back then either.
Probably not. Yeah.
So they had used their visibility of the shore and islands to navigate. Wasn't distances that what's the scale?
Yeah. I don't know that. I didn't look that up, and I'm sure this map is probably not to scale. Randy just grabbed it for me, so I have no idea about this map. I had another one I looked up, but I didn't bring that with me tonight. That's a good question. There you go. You can use your thumb or your finger to count 300 miles. Yep. Okay. Technology's great, isn't it? All right. How about prayer requests? Anything we can pray about tonight? All right. Let's be dismissed in prayer. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you thanking you for the blessing that we have tonight to join together in like mind, circling around your word, reading your word, and learning the history that is the journey that Paul underwent from Caesarea eventually to Rome. We thank you for the documentation that we have from Luke and the accuracy of it so that we can even further know not only of your existence but of the other interesting features that are in your word, that we can confirm our own faith, and for those that we are trying to engage with and teach with, that we can encourage them and increase their faith as well. We thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. We know that there are several that are back with us, and we are thankful to you for that, as well as we ask your prayer and blessing be on those that are still away from us, whether it be for illness or for their own choice. We ask that you be with them and that you bring them back to us at the earliest convenience or the next opportunity. We love you and we thank you for your Son, Jesus. He's given us the opportunity of our salvation, the opportunity of communing with you and expressing our prayers and our needs and concerns to you. And it's in his name, Jesus Christ, that we pray. Amen. Yes, sir.
Ernie Shackleton? Is that his name?
Ernest Shackleton.